Thank you. Yeah, good evening, students. Good evening, Mr. Naveen, Ms. Shamli, Ms. Linga. Good to see you all. I hope the other chapters you're able to cover up. Good evening, everyone. We had discussed on ITC in the last chapter. After ITC, we covered a lot of other things also. We covered how to compute the GST liability, like a special session. Then we had discussed on the registration aspect, right? So after registration, I think there would have been some more topics which you would have understood. And today we'll discuss on payment of taxes. Let's wait for few students. Yes, good evening, Ms. Prerna. Good evening, Mr. Adil, Ashlesha Lau. Okay. So looking forward for a positive response from you because payment of taxes is a very small topic, but it is important. So that, see, these are the smaller topics like the procedural aspects. Okay. Good evening, Ms. Geeta. These are all the procedural aspects under the GST law. Till input tax credit, I would say it is more on the legal aspects. You have to apply it. But on these procedural aspects, there could be questions from an examination perspective, wherein some part of the question will come in and you will have to kind of apply your mind. So, payment of taxes, if you read by yourself, you may feel it's a very dry topic. You may not understand something, some parts of it. So, we will try to make it a little comprehensive in terms of making it practical so that what we read, we will understand. That is the intention of this session. Otherwise, there was no need to explain a theoretical topic, right? But the institute has definitely given one session dedicated for this so that we understand how the payment works, so that any nook and corner, any topic is picked up for your examination, you can definitely answer it with confidence. So that is the objective. I'm happy that students have joined in for this topic also, because this topic, if you don't kind of take it in the live classes, then you'll not be able to understand, right? Then you will have to wait at the fag end when the question answer session comes up, and then you have to ask your question. So it's better that you understand this topic while we are discussing today, because later on, even if you open your book and read the study material, you'll be able to correlate this. Okay, so that's the very importance of this topic. So, like how we had started last sessions, we will do the same way. We will take up a famous quote on how on positivity, on how do we deal with the situation where we are in. Now we are in a situation that we are moving from uh, just free mode to a reading mode now, right? So we are moving to a positive mindset. So we should have a positive mindset, right? So anybody can share it, or I can share my quote. I will start with my quote. Sure, Nagraj. The quote is given by Roy Bennett, wherein he says, "Great things happens to those." Okay, great things happens to those who don't stop believing, trying, learning, and being grateful. Okay, I'll read this again. Great things happen to those who don't stop believing, trying, learning, and being grateful. So don't ever stop doing these things. Always do these things. Believe in yourself. Always keep trying. Always keep learning. and always be grateful to anything. Be grateful to the nature, be grateful to the institute, be grateful to the technology which has helped us to connect with each other. Be grateful to the surrounding, be grateful to the internet which has been giving you the access to get connected. A lot of students have problems connecting to the internet. We should be grateful to the city where we are in. We should be grateful to the country which where we live in. So peaceful here. So we should always be grateful. That's how we will always be blessed and get the positive vibes. Okay, with that positive quote and a positive vibe, let's start with the topic for today, which is payment under GST. We know that when we do a interstate transaction, we charge IGST, and when there is a intrastate transaction, we charge CGST and SGST. Correct? So when there is a intrastate transaction, why it is CGST and SGST? Because CGST goes to the central government and SGST goes to the state government. So what does it mean? When you do a intrastate transaction within the state transaction, the revenue is divided between the central government and the state government. Central government gets a share from it and the state government gets a share from it. So both are happy. Okay. So as far as intrastate transaction is happening, both the governments are happy. We live in a federal system wherein we have a government at the center, and for each state there is a state government. So at the center you have the central government, and at the state level you have state government. Both of them has to give revenue. So central government gets its revenue 50% from the sales what we make, the taxes of it, and 50% the state government gets it. Okay. Both are happy. We are also happy. Now, but when it comes to interstate transaction, we do not give any share to the state government. In an interstate transaction, we give the full revenue to the central government because we charge IGST. Okay. So we charge only IGST and it goes only to the central government. So will the state government be happy? It will not be happy because it's not getting any share. But the central government is saying that when you do a interstate transaction, the consumption is happening in another state, and GST is a consumption based tax. So whatever taxes is being credited, like when the supplier sells the goods from state A to state B, the goods are moving from state A to state B. So what is happening is IGST is being collected, but the IGST is not a direct revenue to the government. Why? Because when the sale is happening from one state, it becomes the input to the other receiver. Okay, so it becomes the input to the other receiver. The other person will claim the input tax credit. Now, how this input tax credit will pass on from state A to state B? Because state A is collecting that, say, Karnataka. From Karnataka, you have sold goods to Tamil Nadu. Karnataka government will not give the its taxes. Correct. So, how will this credit pass on from the state of Karnataka to the state of Tamil Nadu? That is where this IGST comes in. That IGST acts as a bridge that it will take the credit from state A and give it to the state B. Why? Because when the purchase had happened in Karnataka, Karnataka government got the benefit. Now, this benefit has to be passed on. That is where the IGST bridges the gap. So technically talking, IGST, even though it's a tax collected, it is not a ultimate revenue to the government. It is not a profit to the government. CGST and SGST to that extent are profit, but IGST is not a profit to the government because they will take the taxes, collect the taxes of interstate, but they will give that benefit to the other state. That's why IGST in the real sense is not a tax. It is called as a tax, but it is a bridge between interstate transaction of one state to another state. Okay, so these are the taxes which is primarily collected on a intrastate and interstate transaction. Any doubts in what we have discussed on IGST? Because that is very important to understand it technically. Apart from CGST, SGST, and IGST, when we make sale, there are other avenues also to the government because Government can't wait till the TDS, till the GST transaction happens and gets completed. So to block the leakage of the GST revenues, they also collect TDS and TCS. So TDS is also revenue to the government. TCS is also revenue to the government. So government collects taxes and other aspects like TDS, TCS. Then it also collects interest, penalty, late filing fees, and other payments. These are the payments what we make to the government. We have discussed in the introduction how this IGST works, right? You are clear with that now? Understood. Nice. Clear. Very good. Sir, in case of IGST, we simply nullify CGST and SGST. Right. We nullify it to the extent of credit which is available. You are right to that extent. If I have credits, then it gets nullified. If I don't have credit, then I pay it through my cash ledger itself. Clear. Very good. So we are clear that IGST is a bridge which bridges the gap from the transfer of credit from one state to another state. Now, after understanding this, we also have to understand that in the GST regime, once you get your registration, for each registration, you will have three ledgers sitting up. Now, what are these three ledgers? There are three ledgers called as electronic ledgers. One is which is prepared and updated by the taxpayer itself. That is, while his filing is returns, when he files the returns, these two ledgers gets auto-populated. But if he does not file the returns, this will not come in. He will have to file the returns to claim these credit ledgers, which is called as one is electronic cash ledger and another one is electronic credit ledger. So you will have to prepare two ledgers, not by going and preparing that ledgers. You have to file your returns. Once you file your returns, these ledgers gets auto-populated. But this gets populated from the returns what we file. So you have to file your returns, then these ledgers gets popped up. One is electronic cash ledger and electronic credit ledger. What is cash ledger? Whenever I deposit taxes to my GST number, that will come in my electronic cash ledger. And whatever purchases I make or whatever expenses I incurred, and I claim the credit in my GSTR from my GSTR 2B, I claim it in my GSTR 3B. That comes and gets credited in my electronic credit ledger. So, according to schedule, today's e-way bill chapter. Oh my God. Today is payment of taxes. Let me just check. Thanks for bringing that up. So, is the payment of taxes been taught already? As per the schedule shared with me today, it is payment of taxes. Okay, a lot of no, no. In last GST class, we have completed accounts and records chapter. Today is e-way bill chapter. Okay, but payment of taxes is not done. On 13th November, it is payment of taxes. Okay, so what do we do? Do we continue payment of taxes or e-way bill? Last lecture, Payal ma'am told she will take e-way bill. Okay. Thanks, Ashlisha. That was helpful. E-way bill. Both the topics, but today, Voltaire, what we should proceed with payment. Yeah, I think there is a communication issue in the schedule which has been updated. The actual topic for today is payment of tax only. So, e-way bill will be discussed in the subsequent class. I think I will inform the Board of Studies to update the correct schedule.
Sir, we have received the schedule from Shubhankar. Today's e-way bill. We will discuss with Shubhankar and correct it.
Okay. Because e-way bill happens after payment of tax.
Sir,
That is the
today's topic is
payment of tax.
element of
Payment of tax.
payment of tax. Okay, ma'am. Okay, sir.
Oh, fine. Okay, no problem. So we'll continue on payment of tax itself. So okay. So payment of tax, once you make the payment, we were discussing on what are the ledgers which is getting auto-populated. Once you file your returns, then these ledgers gets picked up. One is the electronic cash ledger and then the electronic credit ledger. This is updated by the taxpayer. But once you do this, there is another set of ledger which is prepared and updated on the basis of returns. That is the without your action, it will automatically get picked up, which is the electronic liability register. So there are three ledgers: electronic cash ledger, electronic credit ledger, and electronic liability register. Now, what are the sections? Here, I wouldn't stress on the sections because these are not sections which are very important. Are not very important sections like ITC. So I wouldn't emphasize that you remember this, no problem. But as a reference, I'm just sharing details over here. Section 49 talks about payment of tax, interest, penalty, and other amounts. Then we have in section 49 itself, which talks about the maintenance of three ledgers, that is electronic cash ledger, electronic credit ledger, and electronic liability register. Then section 49A says how you can utilize the input tax credit. 49B says order for utilization of that credit. Section 50, important. Everywhere when you say under the GST law, it says interest as may be applicable. That applicable is there under section 50, which talks about in on any delayed payment of taxes. What is the rate of interest you have to pay is empowered under 50. Section 51 talks about circumstances in which TDS becomes mandatory. 52 talks when TCS is collected by e-commerce operator. 53 says that you can transfer your input tax credit. And what circumstances you can transfer? That is given in section 53. Then section 53A talks of transfer of certain amounts. You can transfer certain amounts in restricted situations, that is covered in section 53A. So we will cover all of sections. So this is basic we have to understand is liability on supply is determined in your monthly returns. And if you're a quarterly filer, then in your respectively quarterly returns, which is the return is there in your GSTR 3B. So it's not that you have to file a separate return to determine your liability. You mention your sale value, you mention the tax that will be capturing the liability. But payment is made through various sections, but return is one. And liability not paid completely cash, be paid in credit. Sometimes it can be paid partially also. The provisions of CGST are applicable to IGST law also. That's why there is only one return is sufficient. You do not have to file separate return under CGST, IGST. One return capturing all the transactions is permitted under the law. Okay. Now we have sections. Sections cannot tell everything, only tell some things. That's why there are rules. So how the flow happens under GST overall is the broad framework, how things has to work out is given in the section. Below the sections, there are rules saying that this section said that something has to be prescribed. Payment of tax shall be made in the manner as may be prescribed. When they say as may be prescribed, thus that methodology is given under the rules. And under the rules, it will tell that you have to make payment like this through the forms. So rules will be given, implemented through forms. GST, GSB is a form. The power comes from the rules. Give effect to some aspects, right? There is notifications. And to clarify something, we have. So if you have to master, you have to read form. Two notifications are also of circulars. Okay. Now, rules which form distorted audio. Recording is on. Okay, fine. Okay. So sections we were discussing, then below the section, it is empowered through these rules. The rules start with Rule 85, which says how electronic liability register will be maintained, or basically it empowers that electronic liability register will be maintained under Rule 85. Rule 86 says electronic credit ledger, and Rule 87 says about electronic cash ledger. So Rule 85, 86, 87, these are the rules for liability register, credit register, and cash ledger. Now, the rule says that there will be 3 running electronic ledgers which is maintained on the dashboard of a taxpayer. So you do not have to, like how we maintain books of accounts, we maintain ledgers, journals, and various things in various accounting softwares. You do not have to maintain it. You just have to file your returns. These returns gets auto-populated. Okay. Electronic liability register says that the liabilities of a taxable person in the form of what all liabilities you can have. You will have liability of the tax amount, the interest, the fees, and penalties. So you will have 4 categories. Then you will have classification of these 4 categories as into various heads of taxes. One is CGST, SGST, and IGST. So if you think of it like a crisp graphical thing, on one side you will have tax, interest, penalty, and other amount, and on the horizontal side you will have CGST, SGST, and IGST. Okay, for against each head you have to make the separate payment, or you should have a separate liability. Tax liability register will reflect the total tax liability of a taxpayer after netting off for a particular month. That is, what is your on that, how much tax you have to pay, less your input tax credit. The net amount will come in your electronic liability register. Once you file your returns, that amount is reflected in the electronic liability register. And once you pay it, how will you pay? You will pay from your cash ledger or credit ledger. Once you make the payment, that will get reduced from your electronic liability register. Okay. Then comes the ITC register, which is also called as electronic credit register. The ITC is a self-assessed, that is, input tax credit as self-assessed in the monthly returns will be reflected in your ITC ledger. So, 2B is the basis from which we claim the credit, but the credit has to be entered by you in your electronic credit register. So, once you input the data in your electronic credit register, that is when that will get reflected in the electronic credit register. You file your returns, mention the credit which you want to claim, that which you can claim goes to your electronic credit register. The credit in this ledger can be used for making payment of only tax amount. Why this is highlighted? This is definitely highlighted for some purpose. I will come back after we read the cash ledger. Okay, just keep this in mind that your ITC register can be used for payment of the tax only. Okay. Then comes the electronic cash ledger, where the cash ledger will reflect all the deposits made in cash and the TDS and TCS which is made on your account by the suppliers. So suppliers will deduct TDS that will come and sit in your electronic cash ledger. This information will be reflected on real-time basis. This ledger can be used for making any payment on account. Okay. This ledger, you can make payment for anything. So the difference between the cash ledger and the credit ledger is your electronic credit ledger, you can make utilization for payment of tax only. But this you can make utilization for payment of on any payment of taxes, any payment other than tax also, which means what? As I said, there are differences. One is there is tax, there is interest, there is fees. So electronic credit ledger, whatever credit we get, that we can utilize for making payment of tax only. But cash ledger, you can utilize for payment of tax, interest, fees, and penalty also. That is the difference between utilization, which we can do for cash and credit ledger. Yes, Navneet, correct. So from cash ledger, we can make utilization of the cash what we pay for any liability, but from your credit ledger, you can use it for payment of only the taxes. आपको interest pay करना है, क्या आप credit use कर सकते हो? Can you, or you have filed your returns late? Now you have to pay. Can you utilize your credit ledger for making payment of the late filing fees? Correct. Right? It has to be paid in cash only. Correct. So only if you have a liability, tax liability to be paid, then you can utilize your credit. If you have tax, interest, penalty, late filing fees, then you can utilize your cash ledger. Details in these ledgers will get auto-populated from the returns file. As we have discussed, once you file your returns, these ledgers gets updated. In cash ledgers, details will get updated from your paid challan because you have to make the actual payment. So once you make the payment in the challan, that gets populated in your electronic cash ledger. Both the ITC ledgers and cash ledgers will be utilized by the taxpayer for discharging the tax liabilities and other liabilities which is arising from your returns and from any demand or appeal orders. So the way how liabilities gets offset is from your own ascertainment. That is when you file your return, these liability comes up. The liability can also come up later on saying that your return is wrong, you have filed an incorrect return. Then there will be liabilities which will be created by the officer. That is called as demand order, which the officer raise it. Once you have a demand order, you are not agreeing to it, you are fight for it. You will file a appeal. Then that is called as a appeal order. So either from the demand order the liabilities come, or the liability appeal orders the demands can come. Okay, these ledgers would be updated in real time on an activity by the taxpayer in connection with these ledgers. So they will not wait to process it. Immediately once you file your returns, these gets updated. Cash ledger will be populated, credit ledger will be populated from GSTR 2B. No, Navneet, from the GSTR 2B, you will file your GSTR 3B. Once you file your GSTR 3B, the credit ledger, cash ledger after, yes, liability register will be populated as per return filing. That's right. But both the credit ledger and the liability register will be populated after we file the returns. TDS and TCS is paid on PAN. Electronic cash ledger can be utilized for such purpose. We are not talking about the TDS and TCS under income tax, Dia. We are talking about the TDS and TCS under the GST. As we had discussed in the previous sessions, one is TDS and TCS, which is paid under the Income Tax Act, and one TDS and TCS is paid under the GST Act. Here, when we talk about TDS and TCS, this is the TDS and TCS under the GST law. The TDS and TCS under income tax, definitely we cannot utilize here. Appeal order means आपके अगेंस्ट कुछ डिमांड रेस किया गया है एंड आपको उसके ऊपर यू आर नॉट हैप्पी विथ इट, देन यू गो ऑन अपील. तो एक अपील ऑफिसर रहेगा, he will pass one order. He's saying that no, what the officer has told is correct. That is called as an appeal order. So at the time of filing GSTR 3B, we have to pay our liability. So how rates will be updated after file return? So once you file your returns, there is a liability and utilization of credit. Both of this happens. So once you file your return, the liability register also gets updated and your credit ledger also gets updated. Balance, whatever is lying in your cash ledger or credit ledger, may be either funded or it can be utilized for your next period. ऐसा नहीं कि आपको कुछ भी बैलेंस है यहाँ पे तो वो ऐसे ही एग्जॉस्ट हो जाएगा, नहीं. Whatever is the balance lying in your credit ledger or balance lying in your cash ledger, you can utilize it for offset the next return. Okay, that credit ledger and cash ledger is a continuing thing. It will be utilized for your next month's return. That means balance liability after filing return. Yes, that's what I had said, the net liability. Now you understood what is the meaning of liability. The balance liability after filing the returns will go to your liability register. But at the time of filing also, how much payment is liable and how much you have utilized, that also will come in your liability register. Clear. Any doubt on liability register? Because we are getting confused when it will get updated, when it will not, right? Clear. Okay. So every ledger will be updated after filing 3B. Technically, yes. So if you have nil liability, then the value will be zero itself. Doesn't mean it will be updated as zero. Okay. I will send a mail, the draft cash. Bye. Shall I send them? Oh, let's send for Okay, so how this credit ledger works is any payments which is made through in your cash ledger, whatever payments you make, right, from your bank account and things that will get added in your electronic cash ledger, and any TDS and TCS will. This is the electronic cash ledger ka credit. So balance has to match, like we have accounting principle of debit and credit. So whatever credit happens, right, that will be debited or that will get reduced when we make payment of things. So from the cash ledger, we can make payment of tax, interest, penalty, and everything. Credit cash ledger, whenever we make the payment, cash ledger gets increased. When we utilize that, it gets debited. So the credit is addition, debit is deletion. That's where this sign that whatever payments we make through various modes gets credited to the cash ledger, and whatever utilization we make or in our returns we utilize the cash ledger, that gets debited. Next is input tax credit on self-assessed basis. That is ITC. When we are claiming the input tax credit in our returns. This is also on basis on returns, not on 2B. 2B is only an here 2B is only an indicator saying how much credit you can claim. But 2B doesn't go to your electronic credit ledger. From the 2B, you have to check, because sometimes the credit will be more. By mistake, somebody has given you the credit. Can you claim it? You cannot claim it. So what you should claim it is what will appear in your GSTR 3B. Okay. So from the input credit we claim for GSTR 3B, that will get added in our electronic credit ledger. Then from the credit ledger, we will utilize the amount for payment of tax only, right? So when we utilize the payment of tax, that gets debited again. It's like your bank account. In your bank, see, like a bank passbook or a bank statement, there are credits, there are debits. What is credits? Credits are all those things. When you deposit cash in your account, he has given check credit, and when you swipe, use a Google Pay, scan it, all of it, you made payment to others, they are all debit in your bank statement. Similar to that, जो भी इस बैलेंस को बढ़ा रहा है वो क्रेडिट है, और इस बैलेंस को घटा रहा है वो है डेबिट. Accounting principle says, yeah, you can't apply those accounting principles straight away here. You can, because debit what comes in. So input tax credit is coming in, that's why it's increasing. Cash is being deposited, debit what comes in. To that extent, it is increasing it. Okay. Bank maintains credit debits like that. Correct. Correct. Credit is deposit and debit is withdrawal from bank. Correct, Nagaraj. Correct. Opposite है यहाँ पे, because the ledger of yours being prepared by the government. So opposite, you can say to some extent, of the accounting principles. Electronic cash ledger. So we understood cash ledger, credit ledger. What is a cash ledger? It is a summary of all the deposits which is made by a taxpayer. Treat it like your bank account. Now, when you deposit amount in the bank, that is your money which is held by the bank. Similarly, electronic cash ledger is your money which is held by the government. And when will the credit happen? Date of credit is on CIN from the collecting bank. What is CIN? We'll come to know. That is once the challan is generated, that is the date of receipt of CIN. Date of credit in the treasury of the state government is deemed to be the date of debit in the ledger. That once you deposit and once you file the return, then it gets debited. Now, payment of taxes, what are the features? These are all theoretical things saying that payment happens electronically, no cash made of payment. Some cases only cash payment is possible, but otherwise all the payments has to happen online itself. It is very convenient. It is logical tax collection. It is faster. So whatever advantages we see in the digital era, all of that are the features of the payment of taxes: PD accounting, paperless transaction, electronic reconciliation, simplified procedure. These are the features of payment of taxes. Okay. Legal provision says that payment to be made for any intrastate supply, tax to be paid as CGST and SGST. For interstate, IGST. In addition, TDS and TCS is paid. Apart from taxes, we have interest, penalty, fees, and other payments which are to be made. Liability to pay GST. is on of specified cases like imports and in case of reverse charge. Okay. When the liability arises for somebody, that is, once he makes any supply, he has to pay GST. When there is specified cases like imports, then the liability will be cast on the recipient. Then notified cases of intrastate supply of services, the liability to pay GST may be cast on e-commerce operators. So who has to pay the GST? There will be three situations GST will be payable when you're supplying something. That is when you're selling something, the liability on will be on you. There is a category called imports and reverse charge. Your supplier will not pay, the receiver will pay. Right? In case of imports, if I am importing, I will pay the GST. And when I'm taking services from outside India, we know are the services when the liability is cast on me under reverse charge. We had a detailed discussion under reverse charge. When the liability is on me as a recipient, that time I will pay GST. Correct? So second category is imports and reverse charge basis. Third category is when they are certain government will pay TDS, and when e-commerce transaction happens, then the e-commerce will pay TCS. So these are the three transactions when tax is payable. SIN Challan identification number. Yes, you're right. Okay. How can you make payment of taxes? Payment of taxes, penalty or fees, anything can be made through online. That is, you can make utilizing credit card, debit cards, or UPI payments, or any IMPS payments directly sitting from your computer. You can make the payment from your net banking. Also, you can make the payment. Now, offline mode is when you do not make the payment online. You generate the challan and you go to the bank. That is called as offline. That is, the challan has to be generated from the portal itself. You cannot, like income tax, you can print the challan, fill it up manually, and go to the bank and make the payment. That process is not allowed under GST. You have to go to your login, go to the section of payment of taxes, tell how much amount you want to pay, and generate the challan from it. You cannot have a manual challan. You should go to the system, the GST portal, enter the amount what you mentioned, your GST number, because it is always there on the GST portal. So from the GST portal, you will method as NEFT and RTGS. What is this method of NEFT and RTGS? You're aware of this. You go to a banker, make transfer. You can payment through check, which will take time, or you can make payment through net electronic fund transfer or national electronic fund transfer or a real-time gross settlement system. These are the methods which are given by the bankers or given by the ICAI through which you can make the payments. If appeal order, Kuldeep's question is, if appeal order contains interest penalty, then same cannot be set off against ITC? No, it cannot. Even if the appeal order says pay the tax penalty, you can make the payment of only tax through the input tax credit register, but payment of penalty and interest has to be made through cash itself. Only ICICI Access HDFC, any bank can be made. There are specified number of banks, quite number of banks through which you can make the payment. Electronic cash ledger and electronic credit ledger balances can be transferred between? No, they cannot. If you have lot of taxes sitting in your electronic credit ledger, can you transfer to your cash ledger? No, you cannot. That's the reason it is differentiated, that credit ledger is credit ledger, cash ledger is cash ledger. There cannot be a transfer from cash to credit or credit to cash ledger, not possible. Okay, only 4 bank debit card options. Okay, so that they've just started off. They will more online payment can be made through any bank. RCM should be paid out of cash ledger only. Yes, we have discussed while discussing RCM chapter also that RCM payment has to be made always through cash ledger only, cannot be made paid through credit ledger. Now the second aspect that offline mein NEFT or RTGS, second is over the counter, that you have cash with you and there is no balance in your bank. Now you want to make payment of GST through cash. Can you do it? Only to the extent of 10,000 rupees. More than 10,000, you want to pay 1 lakh rupees of tax and you have cash. Can you make the payment through cash ki 1 lakh rupees bank mein jama karo or bank will deposit to the government? No. The banks have been permitted that you take cash from your customers only to the extent of 10,000 rupees. Beyond 10,000 rupees, if they want to pay, they will make the deposit in the bank account. From the bank, they can make payment through NEFT or RTGS. But straight away cash to the government account only up to 10,000 rupees. Okay. The date of credit of to the account of the appropriate government will be date of the deposit. जैसे आज NEFT का form भर दिया है and you have given it to the banker for clearing. You have cleared it next day. So what is your date of payment? Today you have deposited the NEFT slip. Is that the date of credit? No, because government is getting the credit next day. That is the date of your actual payment of taxes. You make payment to the banker, banker delays it और banker के technical issue की वजह से कल जाता है अगले दिन. The date of payment is next day, not today. UPI is available. In the first option, yes, UPI is also available. So what if, let's say, assume Mr. X is the proprietor of GST and if payment is made by Mr. Y bank account, then any problem? No. Anybody can make payment in the GST number by mentioning the GST number and generating the challan from the GST login. Now, if you have a GST login, you generate it and give it to me and I make the payment from my bank account, still permitted. But challan should be generated from your login itself. I cannot generate challan from my login and give it to you. Because from my login, I will get challan for my GST number. From your login, challan for your GST number. Sir, if date of presentation late, then maybe interest or penalty? Yes, definitely. Today is the last day you have given the payment to the banker. Now, banker says that there is some technical पे करता है तो आपका पेमेंट डिले हो गया आपको एक दिन के लिए इंटरेस्ट और पेनाल्टी पे करना पड़ेगा. Now we said over the counter the limit is only 10,000 rupees. Correct? उससे ज्यादा नहीं पे कर सकते. But government has given few relaxation saying that नहीं आपके पास cash है तो भी आप पे कर सकते हो in only the following situations where it is deposit to be made by the government departments. Government department को tax pay करना है then the 10,000 limit is relaxed. आपको पे करना है आप सिर्फ 10,000 ही कर सकते हो. When the deposit is made by the government departments, then the limit of 10,000 can get exceeded. The proper officer or any officer which is authorized to recover the taxes when there is a liability, there is a notice given to you and they've confirmed that you have to pay taxes, right? Say taxes of 2 lakh rupees is cast on you and the officer has come to recover the tax. That time you say, no, I do not have account balance in my bank account. I want to pay through cash. Yes, possible. When it is including recovery through attachment proceedings or sale of immovable property. When the officer comes for recovery of the taxes, you're saying, मेरे पास 2 lakh है, but cash में है. Now the portal is not allowing me to pay. That time the officer can allow the banker through a letter saying that yes, he has a liability to pay, so you collect the taxes in cash. That is permitted. सो जब ऑफिसर रिकवरी के लिए आता है, when they come for recoveries for attachment or proceedings or sale of immovable property or movable property, in that point of time you have cash, then you can pay it. Third instance is proper officer and any officer authorized for the amounts collected by way of cash demand of during any investigation. One is recovery, one is investigation. When they come for any investigation or enforcement, that time there is any liability that can be paid. Fourth situation is deposit to be made by persons notified by the commissioner. Then the commissioner notifies that some people can make the payment through cash. That time only it is permitted. Otherwise, except these four situations, you cannot make payment through cash. आपको बैंक अकाउंट में पे करके ऑनलाइन ट्रांसफर या एनईएफटी या आरटीजीएस ही करना पड़ेगा. Sir, I have a doubt that restaurant is ITC is blocked, correct? And I purchased a table on restaurant GST. Then ITC is showing in GSTR through B, and I'm declaring 1 lakh rupees as declared supply. And while preparing GSTR 3B, ITC is showing in 3B. And if I adjust that ITC, then any problem? No problem, because you have to adjust. You are a restaurant service provider and you have 5% ITC. You cannot claim ITC. Even if it is appearing, you have to adjust it by making it 0. If challan is paid more than actual, we can get the refund. When challan is more than what you have to pay, that will sit in your electronic cash ledger. You have an option to utilize it with your return for the next month, or you can claim refund of it. No problem, because आपका ही cash है, you have deposited extra, then you can claim refund of it. I have to remove ITC manually. Yes, you will have to remove the ITC manually. But sir, ITC will be there permanently. It may be there unless you utilize it, will be there with you. As we had discussed in ITC topic, once you claim the credit, it is permanent. Now, you can utilize it for your filing a monthly returns. अगर आपने पूरा यूटिलाइज कर दिया तो खत्म हो जाएगा. आपने यूटिलाइज कम किया तो वहां पे बैलेंस रहेगा. Yeah, I will tell you what is electronic credit reversal and reclaim. But how can I utilize in case of restaurant case? In restaurant case, you cannot utilize. So you have to reverse it because the business of restaurant says and the GST law says in case of restaurant, you have to pay 5% without utilizing your ITC. So जो भी आपका ITC है उसको आपको reverse करना पड़ेगा because you cannot claim it. OTC full form, OTC is over the counter. जब आप काउंटर बैंक में जाके कैश पे करते हैं, that is called as OTC. This is the OTC, over the counter payment. When you go to the bank and make the payment in cash, that is called as OTC payment. And OTC of 10,000 does not arise only in, the limit is exempted in only these 4 instances. Okay. How do you make payment? You can make payment through challan, which is electronically generated. As I had said, you do not have a manual challan. You have to generate electronically from the GST in. GSTIN जो ऑनलाइन आपका पोर्टल है वहां पे आपको लॉग इन करके जो रिटर्न्स फाइल करते हैं वहां पे ऑप्शन है जनरेट अ चालान. कितने का अमाउंट चाहिए, यू हैव टू मेंशन इट, यू हैव टू मेंशन द रिलेवेंट असेसमेंट ईयर, देन द जनरेट गेट्स जनरेटेड, द चालान गेट्स जनरेटेड. Who can generate the challan? Either the taxpayer can generate it, or a authorized representative of the taxpayer, or a departmental officer, okay, or any other person paying on behalf of the taxpayer. He can generate the challan. Anybody can pay the challan on behalf of somebody else also. Then certain key details on the challan like name, address, email, GSTN of the taxpayer will be auto-populated. Single challan is sufficient because in challan may itself you will have CGST, SGST, and IGST, and against tax, interest, penalty, or late filing, it will mention. Once you enter that, one challan you can generate it for multiple boxes also. Tax authorities would send the taxpayer's updated master data to GSTN as well as to accounting authorities, which means you do not have to make the payment to the government directly, you have to make payment to the bank itself. Unregistered person or a casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person. Okay. Any person can pay on the basis of the TIN number, which is the goods and service tax identification number. So normal person will pay on the basis of GST. These unregistered persons, CTP and NRTP. When will CTP and NRTP pay the taxes? Because they have to pay on the basis of temporary identification number. So unregistered person के पास registration नहीं रहेगा, temporary identification number समझ में आ गया. But why should a temporary identification number be open for CTP and NRTP? Did you get my question? The question is that we are saying for a CTP and NRTP, they have to pay on the basis of TIN. TIN matlab temporary identification number. Why should they pay taxes on temporary identification number? Correct. The registration is for limited purposes, but still they will be getting a permanent registration number. No, even though the registration period is for a temporary period, they will get a permanent registration number itself. No, their registration is temporary. Yes, it is for a limited period, but they get a proper GST number. They do not get a temporary number to run the business. Because casual taxable person holds only for 90 days, correct. Lekin they have to make the payment of the taxes before getting the registration. Kyunki they have to pay taxes in advance, correct, Navneet? That they have to make the payment of taxes in advance before getting the registration. उनको advance pay करना है. वो कैसे pay करेंगे without registration? They will make the payment to this TIN, which is a temporary registration number. So on the basis of temporary registration number, they will make the payment of the taxes. And NRTP also same case. A unregistered person also has to make the payment to this temporary identification number. Basic features of the payment is once finalized CPIN is generated and no further changes can be made. That is, once you make the payment, it cannot be changed. CIN gets generated, and if CIN does not get generated, then you have to make a representation through the portal in PMT07. So payment challan जो होता है उसे कहेंगे PMT06. If you made the payment It is got debited from your bank account, but it is not reflected in your portal. You can raise a query through another form called as PMT07. Okay. And all of this is controlled. I will show you a flow chart to understand this in detail. So basically, you are saying there are major heads. Major heads are the tax heads, which is IGST, CGST, SGST or UTGST, and cess. This is called as major heads. Amounts available under one major head cannot be offset with another. अगर offset हो जाता तो we could have made payment under one head, but generally uh, payment has to be made under the correct major head, and then the minor heads. Minor heads are tax, interest, penalty, fees, and others. These are the minor heads. So you have to select the major head correctly and you have to select the minor head also correctly. Okay. So this क्रॉस यूटिलाइजेशन अगर आपने आईजीएसटी का टैक्स में पे कर दिया यू कैन नॉट ऑफसेट विथ आईजीएसटी इंटरेस्ट बट फ्रॉम 1 जनवरी 2020 थ्रू PMT09 अगर आपने मिस्टेकली इंटरेस्ट पे कर दिया इंस्टेड ऑफ टैक्स थ्रू PMT09 यू कैन करेक्ट इट ओके बिफोर अप टू जनवरी 2020 अगर आपने रॉन्ग हेड में पे कर दिया देन यू कैन नॉट हैव एडजस्टेड इट सपोज आपका लायबिलिटी है टैक्स का पेमेंट लेकिन आपने इंटरेस्ट में पे कर दिया है तो फिर क्या करना पड़ेगा यू हैव टू वेट टिल इंटरेस्ट लायबिलिटी कम्स इन एंड यू हैव टू मेक द पेमेंट ऑफ टैक्स अगेन but luckily from 1st January 2020 if you have made payment under wrong minor head you can move it to the correct major head and you can move it to the correct minor head and if you have made payment of IGST instead of CGST that also correction is possible. So major head minor head corrections is possible through this form called as PMT09 which is empowered through section 49(9). So tax in the sense TDS, TCS, rights are under minor heads. No, these minor heads, Goldie. These are the minor heads. Nil return, send SMS. Yes, that is also possible, Nagraj. That if you have a nil return, you can file your returns through just sending an SMS also. Okay. So we were talking about transfer of the head that a registered person can now transfer the amount from one major head or minor head to another major head or minor head or transfer the amount available in the cash ledger to cash ledger for IGST of distinct person. We are talking about transfer, right? अगर मेरे पास मेरा जीएसटी नंबर अलग है आपका जीएसटी नंबर अलग है एंड आपके क्रेडिट लेजर में 1 लाख रुपए है मुझे टैक्स पे करना है 60,000 रुपीज कैन आई गेट द क्रेडिट ट्रांसफर फ्रॉम योर अकाउंट टू माई अकाउंट इज इट पॉसिबल और से कैश में ही पड़ा है आपका कैन आई गेट द क्रेडिट ट्रांसफर कैश ट्रांसफर फ्रॉम योर अकाउंट टू माई अकाउंट नो व्हाई नो ओके others what is your opinion you have lot of cash ledger your liability is zero वैसे ही वेस्ट पड़ा है बोलता हूँ आप मुझे मुझे ट्रांसफर कर दीजिए कैन आई गेट इट ट्रांसफर्ड everybody is saying no कुलदीप is saying yes PMT09 से कर सकते हैं सो क्योंकि इसने स्लाइड पढ़ लिया वो बोल रहा है PMT9 से कर सकते हैं Ashlesh Rao is giving a safe answer because if it is yes also it will be wrong. If it is no, also it will be wrong. So just saying no idea. Credit cannot be transferred, cash can be transferred. Very interesting, Goldie. We can get refund. Cash balance, we can get refund. Credit, you cannot get refund. Khushbu Kumar is saying no, not possible. Shamli Semra is saying yes, we can transfer. Mustafa Mistri is saying maybe. Oh, very safe answers people are playing here. Yes, provided there is no unpaid liability. Clearly mentioned in the screen, Goldie, please read this. Transfer any amount available in the electronic cash ledger to electronic cash ledger for IGST or CGST. Firstly, you cannot transfer SGST. You can only transfer IGST and CGST. Okay. SGST cannot be transferred. You can first transfer IGST and CGST of a distinct person. It doesn't say any person. When there is a distinct person, provided there is no unpaid liability in his electronic liability register, which means that we know under registration chapter we have discussed who is a distinct person. With one PAN, when you have multiple branches, राइट एक स्टेट में एक रजिस्ट्रेशन है, एक और स्टेट में दूसरा रजिस्ट्रेशन है विद द सेम प्लान, देन दे आर कॉल्ड एज डिस्टिंक्ट पर्सन. रिलेटिव्स हो तब भी नहीं होगा बिकॉज ईच रिलेटिव विल हैव अ डिफरेंट पैन, यू कैन नॉट ट्रांसफर इट. बट इफ इट्स अ डिस्टिंक्ट पर्सन विच इज विथ वन पैन having registration in one state, having second registration in the second state, having third registration in the third state, वैसे multiple registrations है in multiple states, only then you can transfer it. Not in all the cases. कि आपके पास क्रेडिट है मुझे दे दो, both of us are not distinct person, you cannot transfer it. And the two, electronic cash ledger का balance, electronic credit ledger का balance you cannot transfer. Clear? Also, PMT09, so major head to minor head का connection, that is also possible in your cash ledger. Credit ledger में आप change नहीं कर सकते हो. Correct. Like same entity has different registration, but in different state. Because in the same state you cannot, because the restriction is here only for the transfer is possible only for IGST and CGST. Correct. For same GSTN possible. Same GSTN में तो ट्रांसफर की जरूरत ही नहीं पड़ेगी ना श्लीषा. सेम पैन की बात चल रही है यहाँ पे. सेल दिखा के तो लायबिलिटी है, वो तो ट्रांसफर कर ही सकते हैं, बट आई एम सेइंग व्हेन देयर इज नो एक्चुअल सेल, सो यू कांट क्रिएट अ सेल व्हेन देयर इज नो सेल. So major head, minor head correction means we can wait till the arrival of minor head to set off minor head balance. No, I didn't understand your question. One more example. I have a branch in Karnataka. I have liability to pay for 50,000 rupees. Now I do not have the cash. Okay. But in my Tamil Nadu branch, they have made a deposit in the cash ledger, but their liability was very less. तो वहां पे कैश लेजर में बैलेंस पड़ा है. आई कैन गेट इट ट्रांसफर्ड. वो अपने लॉग इन करके दे विल टेल फाइल PMT09 और कर्नाटका ब्रांच पे GST नंबर डालेंगे और वहां से यहाँ पे इट विल गेट ट्रांसफर्ड. क्लियर नागराज? Means only we can transfer to distinct person from CGST and IGST only and not SGST. Correct. Correct, Tanu Vishwakarma. In case ISD credit transfer possible, that so he will file the return. Without filing the returns, these transfer can happen. So ISD will file his monthly return and get it transferred. Understood, Ashlisha? Yes. Good. Sale of business as going concern can transfer credit. So there is a procedure there that you have to file a form called ITC 02, then that credit gets transferred. But through PMT 09, without filling any forms, you can transfer it. But yes, through sale of business also credit can get transferred. Okay, understood till here that the transfer of credit in the cash ledger only is possible. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll get into further details. We'll take a break of 10 minutes here and then come back. Yes, sir. Yeah. So we were discussing about transfer in the electronic cash ledger. This is possible only in the cash ledger, not possible in the credit ledger, and also between the same registered person from major head to minor head, from one minor head to another major head. And if he has to transfer to another entity, he can transfer only to a distinct entity. Next is GST payment. Payment is generally made by 20th. That is when you're filing the returns, you will make the payment. Cash payment will be first deposited in the cash ledger and the taxpayer will debit it in while he is filing the returns. Now, various terms have been used, which is CPIN, CIN, BRN. What is this? CPIN means Common Portal Identification Number. CIN is Challan Identification Number, which is a based on the CPIN. A CIN is generated. What is CPIN? It's a temporary number. Once you create a challan, you create a CPIN, and once the payment is made, it is a SIN. Then you have a BRN, which is a bank reference number, and EFPB, which is the electronic focal point branch. Why this is relevant? To see the flow of the GST, which is that once you first a taxpayer goes to the GSTN portal, he enters the details of the amount what he wants to pay. Then a temporary generated challan comes in, which is called CPIN. From the CPIN, it will lead you to the bank, like how we make online payments of Amazon and things. It takes us to the payment gateway or it takes us to the bank account. So you will make the payment either through the net banking or credit card. Once the payment is happened, then the EFPB will generate, that is e focal point bank. Like one bank will assign that all the GST payments will be routed through one EFPB, which is the focal point, one central point. They will generate the CIN because their payment has happened here. Bank has got the amount, so CIN gets generated. Any queries saying that I made the payment but challan is not generated will all go to this EFPB. From there, they will report it to the GSTN saying that this person has made the payment, right? How much time I took to explain? In lesser time than that, all of this happens. Because instantly it has to happen. ऐसा नहीं कि मेरे को चालान generate हो गया लेकिन portal में नहीं दिखा है. Then you will get worried that I have the challan, where did the money go? So all of this is the process which happens in such a fast manner on a digitalized mode that all of this happens instantly. And once the GSTN receives it, they will credit it to the credit ledger or the cash ledger, because credit goes to the cash deposit goes to the cash ledger. This will reflected in the tax ledger of the registered person. Okay, that is how this entire payment option works. Clear with this? Clear. Very nice. Good. So generally when it's in flowcharts, we can understand also easily and we can remember it also easily. Perfect. Okay. Now, what are the rules for utilization of the credit? How do we utilize the credit? Cash ledger can be utilized for making payment of, as we have discussed, tax, interest, penalty, fees, or any amount. From the credit ledger, we can utilize for payment of tax only. Credit ledger cannot be utilized for payment of reverse charge also, because reverse charge has to be made through cash ledger itself. Okay, transfer of amount in electronic cash ledger. We have discussed this, that from one major head to minor head possible, and to distinct person only is possible. ITC register, you can make payment of only output tax. RCM cannot be utilized because RCM gets credited in this ledger, but has to be paid in cash only. क्योंकि हम जब RCM पे कर देते हैं उसका क्रेडिट ले सकते हैं, but first we have to make payment in cash, then we can take the credit of it. Then second is ITC utilization rules. It says simple, very simple, but just pay attention for 2 minutes here. It says that IGST credit should be set off with IGST liability first. फर्स्ट आपको आईजीएसटी क्रेडिट ही यूटिलाइज करना है। आपके पास सीजीएसटी बहुत सारा पड़ा है, बट फर्स्ट यूटिलाइज द आईजीएसटी टू सेट ऑफ विथ आईजीएसटी, दैट इज द फर्स्ट रूल। Then the IGST credit, if something is left out, you can utilize for payment of CGST, and IGST credit you can utilize for payment of SGST. This can happen in any proportion. ऐसा नहीं कि 50% CGST को जाना चाहिए, 50% SGST को जाना चाहिए, ऐसा नहीं है। You can utilize in any proportion. 20% for CGST, 80% for SGST possible. Okay, so IGST credit should be utilized for IGST first, then to the CGST and SGST in any proportion. That is the first rule. That's the this thing that IGST का credit है, I can utilize for payment of IGST. लेकिन ITC of IGST should be fully exhausted. ऐसा नहीं कि आपके पास ITC का क्रेडिट बैलेंस पड़ा है और आप CGST SGST यूज कर सकते हो, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता है। यूटिलाइज, दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, आईटीसी ऑफ आईजीएसटी शुड बी कंप्लीटली एग्जॉस्टेड। जो भी आईजीएसटी का क्रेडिट है उसको आपको पूरा यूटिलाइज करना है, फिर आपको सीजीएसटी और एसजीएसटी का क्रेडिट यूज करना है। दैट इज द फर्स्ट रूल। सेकेंड, सीजीएसटी क्रेडिट कैन बी ऑफसेट विद सीजीएसटी लायबिलिटी, and CGST credit after the liability utilization, if something is left out, you can utilize for payment of IGST. Cross utilization with CGST and IGST is possible. Similarly, SGST credit utilized with SGST completely. If something is left out, you can offset with IGST liability. Right? यहाँ पे ऐसा कोई मैंडेटरी रूल नहीं है जैसे आईटीसी ऑफ आईजीएसटी में था। एंड वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, नो क्रॉस यूटिलाइजेशन बिटवीन सीजीएसटी एंड एसजीएसटी, दैट इज नॉट पॉसिबल। करेक्ट, पहले आईजीएसटी नील करना है, फिर सीजीएसटी और एसजीएसटी का क्रेडिट यूज करना है। So to explain this in a diagramical manner, first आपके पास तीनों क्रेडिट है, आईजीएसटी, सीजीएसटी एंड एसजीएसटी। लेकिन फर्स्ट यूटिलाइज द आईजीएसटी क्रेडिट कंप्लीटली। आईजीएसटी का क्रेडिट यूटिलाइज करेंगे फॉर व्हाट? फॉर पेमेंट ऑफ आईजीएसटी फर्स्ट। Then, if anything is left out, we will utilize towards CGST and then with SGST. Now, this can happen in any proportion. CGST and SGST यहाँ पे equal दिख रहा है आपको, लेकिन the rule is you can utilize in any order. 50-50 करना है 50-50 कर सकते हो, 100% जीरो करना है 0% करना है, वो भी कर सकते हो। ओके, बट रूल इज आईजीएसटी का टंकी पूरा खाली होना है, तभी आप सीजीएसटी और एसजीएसटी का क्रेडिट यूटिलाइज कर सकते हो। दैट इज फर्स्ट। सेकेंड, सीजीएसटी का क्रेडिट जो है उसको आप लाइक विथ लाइक, ठीक है, जो सीजीएसटी का क्रेडिट है और सीजीएसटी का लायबिलिटी है, आपको सीजीएसटी का लायबिलिटी सीजीएसटी के क्रेडिट से पहले यूटिलाइज करना है। कुछ बच जाता है तो आईजीएसटी के लायबिलिटी से ऑफसेट करोगे। सिमिलरली एसजीएसटी विथ एसजीएसटी लायबिलिटी फर्स्ट, फिर आईजीएसटी के साथ ऑफसेट करोगे। क्लियर है यहां तक? This will be very helpful. Like we have seen in the problem solving session, they will say utilize the credit in the optimum manner. So this you have to work out कि कैसे optimum manner में आप utilize कर सकते हो, so that there will be less payment of cash, less burden to the taxpayer. Perfect. Then common points is when a refund is claimed. Yeah, whenever you claim a refund, when can we claim a refund? In two instances, when you make an export or when you supply to a SEZ unit, or in the that is called zero rated supply. And in case of inverted duty structure, when my rate of input is more than my rate of output, then I can claim it. जब भी whenever I claim for refund, that time there will be a debit in my electronic credit ledger. Okay, that is the first point. Then refund, once it gets rejected, then the credit ledger will be refilled. Okay, those are the common point. IGST full utilization mandatory. Yes, Ashlisha, IGST ka full utilization is mandatory. Okay. Restriction on utilization of credit is Rule 86A. Now these are the rules saying that आपका ITC क्या है. This we have already discussed in ITC also. We are just recapturing here that your ITC will be blocked when you have availed on the basis of tax invoice or any valid documents which is issued by a non-existent supplier. आपके पास credit है, but the officer has found out that the supplier who has supplied the invoice to you, he is not existing or he is not conducting any business, or you have claimed the credit without receiving the goods actually, or tax in relation to which has not paid to the government. One of the conditions to claim the credit is tax should be paid to the government. लेकिन आपके सप्लायर ने क्या किया, टैक्स जो है गवर्नमेंट को पे नहीं किया है. In such situations your credit will be restricted, or the tax in relation to has which has not been paid to the government, or the registered person who is availing the credit, he is not having the tax invoice. तो मतलब आपका क्रेडिट जो है फेक क्रेडिट है. Now if the government proves that, then you can have a restriction to utilize your credit. आपका क्रेडिट लेजर लॉक हो जाएगा. So 86A is like a lock to your credit ledger. The credit we claim is to make payment of taxes, but your credit will be blocked and you cannot utilize the credit once these circumstances are existing. Sir, under RCM, if recipient is not paid RCM, how will government get to know? Government does assessment, adjudication, investigation, scrutiny of the returns. So many tools they have to find it out. Because supplier, if he is registered, he will report that he is supplied and he is not paying tax, receiver has to pay. That is one tool. Second is if you are making any transactions in your balance sheet, from the balance sheet, if you made payment to a lawyer, that will reflect. When you make payment to a goods transport agency, that will reflect. So officers also does audit of your books of accounts. That point of time, they will get to know that these are the RCM which is liable to be paid, but you have not paid. Yes, these points are covered in ITC chapter also. Very good, Shamli, you remember that. Okay, so restriction will be applicable for 1 year. This is not relevant. Electronic liability register. Once you have your GST return file, तो फिर output minus input जो भी net liability बचता है, that will appear in your electronic liability register. The rules applicable here is liability जो है आपका, this is very important. Any self-assessed tax has to be discharged first relating to previous tax period. आपका पिछला ड्यू है, आप इस पे पीरियड का क्लियर करना चाहते हो, नॉट पॉसिबल. जो पिछला रिटर्न्स का ड्यूज है फर्स्ट वो क्लियर कीजिए, देन क्लियर करंट मंथ्स टैक्स पीरियड. ठीक है, क्लियर ऑफ द लायबिलिटी ऑफ द प्रीवियस टैक्स पीरियड्स, then clear the liability of the current tax period. And then if there is any liability for demand under 73 or 74, 73 or 74 are the sections wherein officer can demand liability. So that liability can be determined or be paid after clearing the liability of the previous tax period, then clear current tax period, then pay liability under 73 or 74. कब तक लायबिलिटी को डिले मींस पोस्टपोन कर सकते हैं? जब तक आपको टाइम लिया जाता है नोटिस में, राइट? यू कैन नॉट डिले बियॉन्ड रीजनेबल पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, एंड दे विल मेंशन दैट वंस द ऑर्डर इज डिटरमाइंड, आपको दे विल गिव यू 30 days, एंड इफ यू डू नॉट पे वो आपका बैंक अटैच कर सकते हैं. ओके, सो एनी लायबिलिटी इज डिटरमाइंड हैज टू बी पेड इमीडिएटली. सो अगेन रिकैप्सुलेशन ऑफ द क्रेडिट लेजर, कैश लेजर. क्रेडिट में क्या क्रेडिट होगा? आईटीसी, जो हम आईटीसी क्रेडिट लेंगे वो क्रेडिट लेजर में क्रेडिट हो जाएगा. वंस यू मेक द पेमेंट वो डेबिट हो जाएगा. कैश लेजर में जो भी हम पेमेंट करेंगे दैट विल गेट credited, and the TDS and TCS का अमाउंट also gets credited. once you make the payment that will get debited. तो ये डेबिट होके कहाँ जाता है? ये डेबिट होके यहाँ पे आता है. जो यहाँ पे डेबिट होगा वो यहाँ पे क्रेडिट हो जाएगा. दैट वॉट एवर डेबिट हैपेंस इट गोज टू द क्रेडिट ऑफ द लाइबिलिटी रजिस्टर. लाइबिलिटी रजिस्टर में डेबिट क्या होगा? जो भी हम रिटर्न में लाइबिलिटी दिखाएंगे वो डेबिट होगा. तो दैट डेबिट विल गेट ऑफसेट विद क्रेडिट ऑफ दीज. तो यहाँ पे डेबिट, वहां पे क्रेडिट. करेक्ट. तो डबल एंट्री का सिस्टम ऐसे ही होता है ना. बैंक में क्रेडिट होता है, हमारे बुक्स में डेबिट होता है. करेक्ट. टू दैट एक्सटेंट क्रेडिट लेजर में जो भी डेबिट होता है वो लाइबिलिटी रजिस्टर में क्रेडिट हो जाएगा. क्लियर? पेमेंट्स ऑफ ऑल द लाइबिलिटीज मतलब कैश लेजर से क्या पे कर सकते हैं? हम टैक्स पे कर सकते हैं. राइट. फ्रॉम द थिंग फ्रॉम द कैश लेजर. क्रेडिट लेजर से तो सिर्फ टैक्स ही पे कर सकते हैं. फ्रॉम द कैश लेजर वी कैन मेक पेमेंट ऑफ वेरियस टैक्सेस, दैट इज TDS, TCS, RCM liability, amount payable under section 10, which is a composite taxpayer. वो भी पे कर सकता है. इंटरेस्ट, पेनाल्टी, फीस, ये सब कुछ पे कर सकते हैं इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कैश लेजर से. Amount remaining in electronic cash ledger after payment of taxes can be claimed as refund. Because आपके बैंक अकाउंट में आप ज्यादा पैसे रखते हैं तो विड्रॉ कर सकते हैं ना. वैसे ही इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कैश लेजर में आपने ज्यादा जमा कर दिया है, आपके रिटर्न्स को आप ऑफसेट नहीं कर सकते हो, तो फिर कैश लेजर का आप रिफंड ले सकते हो. क्रेडिट लेजर का रिफंड सिर्फ 3 केसेस में ले सकते हैं. Presumption section 49 says that there is a presumption that taxes what is being paid is being passed over. मतलब अगर आपने किसी से टैक्स कलेक्ट किया है तो it will be assumed that it is being passed over. मतलब it is always been assumed कि जो भी टैक्सेस आप कलेक्ट कर रहे हो वो आपके रिसीवर को आप पास ऑन कर रहे हो. What is the benefit of this? There is something called as unjust enrichment. कि आप टैक्स पे करो और उसका रिफंड भी ले लो, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता है. सो इट इज ऑलवेज अज्यूम्ड दैट एनी पर्सन हु हैज पेड द टैक्सेस टू द गवर्नमेंट शैल बी डीम दैट ही हैज पास्ड ऑन द बेनिफिट. वो बर्डन उसका नहीं है, जो कस्टमर है उससे वो टैक्स कलेक्ट कर रहा है. दैट इज ऑलवेज द प्रिजम्पशन अंडर द GST लॉ. A person who has charged tax on his invoice is presumed to have been collected. Supplier, customer ने दिया है नहीं दिया, that is secondary. Unless you prove contrary, it is always assumed कि आपने invoice में tax चढ़ा दिया है तो customer आपको पे कर देगा. Clear? Which means what? अगर आपको रिफंड क्लेम करना है देन द सप्लायर कैन नॉट आस्क फॉर रिफंड सिंस ही इज कलेक्टेड फ्रॉम द रिसिपेंट. अगर रिसिपेंट रिसीवर ऑफ गुड्स ने पे नहीं किया तो आप रिफंड क्लेम कर सकते हो. लेकिन आपने तो टैक्स आपके पॉकेट से नहीं पे करा है, आपके कस्टमर ने आपको पे किया है, तो फिर कस्टमर रिफंड क्लेम कर सकता है. एज अ सप्लायर यू कैन नॉट क्लेम रिफंड. What are the advantages of the new payment system? ये theoretical है, आप पढ़ सकते हो. Nothing to discuss on this. Now, provision of interest, very important. That section 50 talks about interest. Interest shall be payable in case where a person fails to pay the tax on or any part thereof to the government for the period for which the tax or any part thereof remains unpaid. Which means अगर आपका रिटर्न आप लेट फाइल करते हो, गवर्नमेंट ने कहा 20th तक पे करो, अगर आपने 20th तक पर पे नहीं किया है तो क्या होगा? आपको लेट जितना भी करोगे उसके लिए आपको इंटरेस्ट पे करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है. सो दैट इज टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस दैट ऑन एनी डिले यू हैव टू पे इंटरेस्ट. फर्स्ट पॉइंट कितना है? एट अ रेट विच इज नोटिफाइड एज 18%. जो अगर हम रिटर्न्स लेट फाइल करते हैं, टैक्स लायबिलिटी है, हम नहीं पे करते हैं, तो फिर हमको इंटरेस्ट के साथ जमा करना है. इंटरेस्ट का रेट है 18%. And new proviso is being inserted in section 51 to provide for charging interest only on the net amount. मेरा जीएसटी, व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ दिस? मेरा जीएसटी लायबिलिटी है 1 लाख रुपीज। 40,000 आई हैव पेड थ्रू क्रेडिट, 60,000 आई हैव पेड टू कैश। इंटरेस्ट 18% 1 लाख के ऊपर लगेगा, 40,000 के ऊपर लगेगा, या 60,000 रुपए के ऊपर लगेगा, या किसी के ऊपर नहीं लगेगा। दिस आई हैव टोल्ड दैट 1 लाख लाइबिलिटी था, 60,000, 40,000 क्रेडिट लेजर से पे किया है, 60,000 क्रेडिट लेजर से पे किया है, एंड आई एम फाइलिंग द रिटर्न लेट बाय 10 days। 18% fixed per annum, yes, 18% is fixed per annum, not per month। कैश लेजर पे लगेगा, कितने अमाउंट पे लगेगा भैया? पूरे 1 लाख पे। तन्नु इज सेइंग 1 लाख, दिव्या इज सेइंग 60,000। दिव्या, या Steffi is saying on 60,000, right? So 40,000 I have made payment through credit ledger. On that, interest will not be applicable. On the 60,000 rupees, which is I'm paying through cash ledger, on that interest will be applicable. So 60,000 into 18% into 10 by 365, because the 18% rate is per annum and interest you'll pay for the number of days of delay. Clear? That is on the first part. But when the liability is in case of any proceedings under 73 and 74, and then returns are filed, मतलब officer has determined and then you are paying, then आपको credit ledger का benefit नहीं मिलेगा. This first example you have understood. Now, if the same example, if I say that I have not filed the return late, I have just filed the normal return, but the officer comes and finds out that your liability is not paid and is given a notice under 73. Then I file the return. In that situation, interest will be paid on the whole 1 lakh rupees. Interest shall be calculated from the day succeeding the day on which tax was due. अगर 20th को टैक्स पे करना था, आपने 25th को पे किया, then you will not consider 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. No, you will calculate it from 21st, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Because on the date of payment, you have not made the payment. जब से अगले दिन से you will calculate the number of days of delay. ठीक है? Then interest shall be payable in case where the taxable person makes an undue or excess claim. आपने आईटीसी लेना था, लेकिन आपने आईटीसी ज्यादा लिया है, ठीक है? तो in that case also there will be interest payment. Earlier this was at 24%, but this is also now got reduced to 14%. Sorry, 18% ही सेम आ गया. आपको आईटीसी क्लेम करना था 1 लाख, आपने क्लेम कर दिया 2 lakhs. सो 1 लाख आपने एक्सेस जो क्लेम किया है उसको आपको रिटर्न करना है. ऑन दैट रिटर्न ऑल्सो यू विल डू इट एट 18% itself. सर फ्रॉम क्रेडिट लेजर ऑल्सो वी पेड लेट ना चलेगा, लेकिन आपका क्रेडिट था ना, गवर्नमेंट के पास क्रेडिट था. क्योंकि क्रेडिट को गवर्नमेंट आपसे नहीं ले सकता है, इसीलिए गवर्नमेंट ने कहा इलेक्ट्रॉनिक क्रेडिट लेजर से जो पे करेंगे उसके ऊपर आपको इंटरेस्ट नहीं पे करना है। If previous return liability tax remaining still we can file returns for next month, no। जैसे हमने बताया था ना, प्रीवियस मंथ का लायबिलिटी फर्स्ट क्लियर करना है, फिर इस मंथ का आप क्लियर कर सकते हो। ओके, सो इंटरेस्ट अगर आईटीसी एक्सेस क्लेम है तब भी 18% है। Next, interest. What are the important points? Clarification received that interest is payable on net, not on gross. Interest is automatic, so no discretion. In case of belated payment of taxes, it should be made voluntarily. In case of any objections, interest is payable on the final order. मतलब आप अगर कुछ अपील जाते हो, you're not agreeing with the liability determined by the officer, तो फिर आप अपील पे जाओगे। अपील पे जो ऑफिसर डिसाइड करेगा उसके ऊपर आपको इंटरेस्ट पे करना है। Interest will be debited to the electronic liability register or from the credit register। क्रेडिट है आपके पास 1 लाख रुपए, इंटरेस्ट आपका 50,000 है, क्रेडिट लेजर को यूटिलाइज कर सकते हैं क्या? कैश लेजर में मेरा जीरो है बैलेंस, इंटरेस्ट लाइबिलिटी आता मेरा 50,000 रुपीज, क्योंकि मैंने टैक्स ऑलरेडी पे कर दिया है, और मेरे पास इलेक्ट्रॉनिक क्रेडिट लेजर में 1 लाख रुपीज है, तो उसको यूटिलाइज कर सकता हूँ ना? करेक्ट, आई कैन नॉट यूटिलाइज, ऑल ऑफ यू आर राइट। Only tax can be utilized from the electronic credit ledger. So even if I have 1 lakh rupees in my credit ledger, the liability of 50,000 has to be paid through cash only. Right. Every person who is liable to pay tax in accordance with the provision of this act or rules made under but fails to pay the tax to the government within the prescribed shelf for the period for which tax or other part remains unpaid, pay on his own interest at such rate not exceeding 18%. Yeah, this is fine. Now, what is gross liability and what is net liability? Because they've said that tax has to be paid on the net liability. Interest is paid on net cash liability or the net liability. So there is a sales of 15 lakh rupees. Purchase and expense for this month is 10 lakh rupees. So what is my gross liability and what is my net liability? Gross 15. Okay. Others. Yes, sir. Okay. हाँ, अभी ठीक है। ओके। Net is 5 lakh. Wrong answer. Gross liability 15 lakh. Net liability 5 lakhs. Wrong answer. 5 lakhs. Wrong answer. Shamli Sharma. Wrong answer. Diya Jain. Wrong answer. Shraddha. Wrong answer. Ashlesha is given the correct answer. Taxable sales into GST rate. Because the tax liability I have not decided. I've only told the sales. So don't consider the sales and decide what is your gross liability. I've not told you the rate of tax. So when the rate is applied on this sale value, that will be your gross sales. Okay. So on 15 lakhs, what is the tax? That is gross. Then the net will come. So after determining output tax is 2 lakh 70, input tax is 167. Now you tell me what is the gross liability and net liability. Yes. 2 lakh 70 is the gross and net is 167. 103. Correct. So 270 minus 167 is your net. So now you understood what is the gross and what is net, right? 1 lakh 10,000 diya. How did you get that? Right. Gross is 2 lakh 70 and net is 1 lakh 3,000. So gross liability and net is 1 lakh 3,000. Now why gross and net is important? Because interest is applicable on net and not on gross. Okay. Now, what does this provision say is interest is payable at 18% as long as you declare in the returns. If you have not declared in the returns, then the tax will be on the gross. जैसे मैंने सेल किया इस मंथ, मैंने इस मंथ के रिटर्न्स में दिखा दिया है और आई एम फाइलिंग द रिटर्न्स लेट, देन इंटरेस्ट इज ऑन नेट. बट मैंने इंटरेस्ट में ही गपला कर लिया है, इन माई रिटर्न्स में मैंने गपला कर दिया कि दैट द सेल ऑफ दिस मंथ आई हैव नॉट शोन इन दिस मंथ, I've shown in the next month, then interest will be payable on the gross amount is what this provision added to 51 is saying. Now, how do we say that? Let's understand this. Say you're filing a return for the month of April. Okay. What is the due date for April? 20th May. In this case, there are various scenarios. First is my payment and filing is done on 18th May. Gross output tax is 10 lakhs and ITC is 7 lakhs. What is the interest payable? Very good. Deepak Thakur, very fast answer. Ashlisha, very good. Correct answer. 554,000. Okay. Others? Shraddha, wrong answer. Correct, Navneet. So only two people have given the correct answers. Others have given wrong answers, or few have not given the answers itself. Kuldeep, right answer. Yes, Tanu Vishwakarma, right answer, because we have filed the return on time, so there is no interest liability. Okay, Deepak Thakur, your answer was not right. You just said that 10 minus 7, 3. No. But see, is there a return filing late? Clearly, the due date is 20th May. I filed it on 18th. Why interest liability? No interest liability. Second case, payment and filing is done on 28th August. Here, how much will be the interest liability? Okay. Few people have considered calculated correctly on 3 lakhs into 18% into 100 days. 8 कैसे हुआ भाई Navneet? Into 100 divided by 365 days. 14,794. So be it. Yes. 100 days are correct. 14,795. Perfect. Okay. Now this is a general thing. Now we'll go to a situation where the interest is to be paid for the period of delay in filing, right? If I have declared it in the that month, then normal provision. But if I've declared the turnover itself in the next month, then it will be on the gross value. For that, I have another example. Payment of tax due date is April. For April month, due date is May. Situation one, April का turnover returns है. I have made the supplies also in April and amount is 10,000 rupees. Actual filing date is 1st June. Payment through electronic credit ledger is 6,000 and cash ledger is 4,000. Interest, आपको interest calculate नहीं करना है because now you know whatever is the tax value, net value लेंगे into 18% करेंगे into number of days divided by 365. Don't do that calculation. Come one step behind. Just tell me on what value you will calculate the interest. Will it be on 10? Will it be on 6? Will it be on 4? Or will it not be at all? 10,000. Gross pay. Why 10,000? Last reporting of outward of April due was May. Correct. So 4,000. Right. So I have reported April sales in the April month itself. So tax will be on net value itself. So it will be on 4,000 rupees. Okay. April month is the tax period. March sales I'm reporting in April. March ka sales था 15,000. I should have reported in March, but I did not report in March. I've reported in April. Okay. So will I get the benefit now, or should I pay tax on the 15,000 rupees? Right. With this example, Ashlisha, you will get clarified now. Right. So in this case, it will be on 15,000 rupees because the turnover of March I am declaring in April. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता है कि इस मंथ का मैं टैक्स अगले मंथ में दिखाऊंगा और मुझे सिर्फ फिर भी नेट वैल्यू पे इंटरेस्ट पे करना होगा, वो बेनिफिट मुझे नहीं मिलेगा. I have to pay on whole 15,000 rupees only because the turnover of March I am not declaring in March, I am declaring in April. Clear here? करेक्ट, क्रेडिट लेजर कैश इंक्लूड दोनों पे लगेगा, राइट। यस, गॉट टू थिंक अ लॉट, यस यू हैव टू। पेनाल्टी भी लगेगा, हाँ, लेट फाइलिंग फीस भी लगेगा। Okay. Next provision is transfer of credit. It says that credit of IGST when it is utilized for CGST has to be restored to the CGST, and whenever CGST is being utilized has to be restored to the IGST. So IGST becomes an adjustment. So that is what section 53 and section 18 says, that when you pay output of CGST, utilizing of input of CGST, that CGST credit goes here, right? So this restoring happens through section 53. That is what is section 53 saying. Similarly, when you have CGST payable, you will utilize input of CGST, right? Through the IGST credit, when it is being utilized, that gets restored. This is what it says. ITC of CGST, which is used for payment of IGST, amount equivalent to ITC, so used is transferred to the central government from the CGST account. जैसे मैंने कहा था, from one state to another state, it gets transferred. So IGST acts as a bridge when it has to transfer from CGST, UTGST, and SGST. Amount equivalent to ITC is getting transferred from IGST account to the CGST account and vice versa. Okay, time for some MCQ. Before that, any questions? We have another 10 minutes. We'll take up some 5 MCQs. Okay, let's get into the MCQs then. Right, many correct answers. Right. Which of the following is not a permissible mode of deposit in electronic cash ledger? Internet permissible. Check deposit 25,000 over the counter permissible? No. Check deposit up to 10,000 is permissible. NEFT RTGS permissible. Over the counter payments up to 10,000 rupees per challan per tax? Yes. So the correct answer is B. What is the sequence of payment of tax? option D. So saying all dues previous period, then demand raised in 73 and 74, then all dues related to current period. No. The correct option is first C, then B, and then A. So the correct answer is C. How can payment of interest? How can payment of interest penalty and payment under reverse charge be made? Right? So the correct answer is yes, it is B. You have to make the payment through cash ledger only. In any order. Oh my God. Wrong, Shamli Sharma. There is a order. Cross utilization of available IGST after utilization of payment of IGST is done in the following chronological order. IGST के बाद which one will you do? Correct, Shamli Sharma. Yes, the answer is C. After IGST, you have utilized, you can utilize CGST and then UTGST. IGST का credit जो है, you can utilize for payment of CGST and UTGST in any order. Correct. It's not necessary A or B. First, you have to utilize CGST, then SGST. ऐसा नहीं है. You can utilize CGST and then UTGST in any order. Yes, Navneet, your answer also is right. Good. Everybody is going towards A. Why A? ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. It is C itself because you can utilize the IGST credit with CGST and SGST in any order. Why confusing, Diya? Is the question confusing? The question is confusing. You should get used to it because this is how the questions appear in your एग्जाम्स एज वेल। आपका सही था, यस। तो फिर चेंज क्यों किया? Didn't read question properly. Okay. मैंने गलत तो शामली शर्मा को बोला था। लास्ट क्वेश्चन फॉर द डे। ITC of CGST is first utilized for payment of CGST and balance is utilized for payment of IGST. So only one sentence is correct, which is C. Why A and B is incorrect? Because ITC of CGST is first utilized for payment and balance is utilized for payment of SGST. No, because CGST you cannot cross utilize with SGST. SGST is first utilized for payment, so cross utilization is not possible. So correct answer is C only. Why? Yeah, yeah. Most of you have said. Some are saying D. Steffi, how is it D? Yeah, yeah. Shraddha, your answers is correct. Don't have any doubts in it. Be confident with your answers, right? Simple topic, simple MCQs, but still we are getting confused, which means that it is just one revision and one concentration which is required. If we concentrate and we revise it, it is very easy to get marks. And you're really lucky that you have MCQs. So make utilization of the MCQs and just cross it. Okay, very simple, very easy now to clear your exams, I would say. Yeah, notes I will definitely upload. Don't worry, Nagraj. Okay, so I have my next class on the topic of returns on the 20th. So 20th, we will meet on the topic of returns. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend. Have a, yes, very interesting. Thank you very much. If this topic is very interesting, then you guys are really rocking. You have understood the theoretical subject also very well. Awesome. Thank you very much. Bye. Good night. Yes, sir. Thank you. Good night.